Before we get started, I've got to say, holy pants, you guys. Holy pants. 250,000 subscribers and 25 million views. That's pure insanity. I cannot even believe it. If you're one of those quarter of a stinking million people that have subscribed to me, just thank you. Thank you so much for sticking around this long and watching my stuff. You guys are the absolute best fans a YouTuber like me could possibly, in any reality, ask for. Next big milestone, 500,000. Anyway, on with the show. I cannot even tell you how much I hate this image right here. It's been making the rounds on Twitter, and it's just the worst. And you know what? I'll admit it's very likely that it's a half joke. Maybe even the original creator knows that some of these comparisons are a stretch. The thing is, though, it's representative of a very real mindset shared by a lot of people right now. There are people who think Nintendo fans are hypocrites for being disappointed with the Wii U, but happy with the Switch. Honestly, I feel like the rebuttals for this idea are obvious. When I look at this image, it seems obvious why it's completely ridiculous to compare these two libraries and suggest that Nintendo fans are being hypocrites. But you know what? I want to talk about it anyway. I'm all for different people having different opinions, but it is a pet peeve of mine when people, instead of simply stating their own opinions, attack the opinions of others and make silly generalizations like this, ignoring the many, many factors that come into play with any given subject. So it looks like this whole Nintendo fans are hypocrites attitude has rubbed me just wrong enough to coax a video out of me. Maybe all this goes without saying, but you know what? It'll be cathartic to say it, so I'll say it. So let's look at this image and form a rational opinion on it. Or, more accurately, let's complain on the internet about people complaining on the internet about people complaining on the internet. Okay, so this thing is suggesting that the Wii U and Switch libraries are so similar that no one should be able to prefer one over the other. And you know what? They are quite similar. Obviously, there are a lot of Wii U games that have been ported over to the Switch. So fine, we'll give it that. We'll give it those games right there. Then Smash Brothers? Yeah, the Wii U definitely had a Smash Brothers. Personally, as you might have heard me say in the past, I wasn't really interested in it in large part because it didn't have any kind of substantial single-player adventure mode, but looking at it from a broader perspective, it sounded like most people were happy with it anyway. Maybe Smash 5 will end up fixing that problem, maybe it won't. Maybe it'll really be just two titles of Smash that are of about the same quality. So I'll give this thing Smash 2. You can have Smash, you image. Moving on to Splatoon, now's where things start getting iffy. Splatoon on the Wii U was good, but 2 was such a massive improvement in terms of both gameplay balance and content that it's hard for me to give each of these releases the same amount of credit. But you know what? Let's do it. For the sake of this whole comparison, let's do it. Let's say the Wii U was just as Splatoon-y as the Switch is. But this is where the whole thing falls apart. We're left with 4 game comparisons, and let me tell you that they are not good comparisons. First, let's look at the most bizarre one on the list. Super Mario Maker and Mario and Rabbids Kingdom Battle. Those aren't the same game, or the same series. I don't know if you noticed. Mario is the only common element here. And yeah, Mario Maker is indeed something that the Wii U has over the Switch right now, until the inevitable port or sequel comes our way, but Mario & Rabbids is a big third-party exclusive tactical RPG adventure with awesome gameplay and a story and bosses and amazing cutscenes. You cannot try to downplay it by sticking it next to Mario Maker and suggesting that that's the same thing. You can't downplay it at all. It's something brand new, very awesome, and exclusively Switch. Moving on though, we've got Kirby. Yeah, these are both Kirby games. Thing is, as unimpressed with Star Allies as I was, it was still a traditional mainline Kirby game, not a touch-controlled sequel to a DS Kirby spin-off. And trust me, I've been on the wrong side of this argument before. There is a difference between mainline Kirby and spin-off Kirby, especially in these specific cases. One of these drummed up a lot of hype and garnered a lot of sales. The other, at least from my perspective, came and went without much fanfare at all. Now we're really cooking though. Breath of the Wild. It baffles me that anyone would consider this a fair comparison. Yes, both the Wii U and the Switch have this phenomenal game. But the Wii U didn't get it until its very last day of being alive. The game did not exist on the Wii U until the day its replacement hit store shelves. If it had released on Wii U a year or two before, this would be a different story. The game would have propped up that library and driven more people to actually buy Wii U's. We would have been like, holy cow, this is an amazing Wii U game. The Wii U is much more valuable now. But coming right at the end like that, it didn't end up counting for much. If anyone looked at Breath of the Wild and said, I'm going to buy whatever system that game is on so that I can play it, I can't imagine a lot of them ended up settling on Wii U. There was little reason to buy a Wii U at that point. Who wants to invest in a system that is, by the company's own accounts, dead? Then, without a doubt, the most offensive item on this list. I know I've done a fair amount of 3D world bashing. I do like the game. It's a lot of fun, it's well designed. But really, you're comparing this to this. You can't. You just can't. You cannot tell me that I'm a hypocrite for being underwhelmed by Mario in a catsuit and considerably more excited for Mario riding a lion creature through a huge desert and possessing a dinosaur and fighting a giant robot bug in the rain and returning to the open format that I'd been hoping and praying for 15 years. Say what you will about the deeper elements of level design. If you tell me that in many ways 3D World is a better designed game than Odyssey, I won't even tell you you're wrong. I will very much respect that opinion, and I'll even agree with you to a point. But when talking about commercial appeal, you can't underestimate the value of wow factor. See, these last two games are the strongest examples of why this whole comparison doesn't make sense, and yes, that's only 2 out of 12 in the image, but they're undoubtedly the most important ones. Most of the other games are good games, but they're not system sellers. And I'm sorry because I've said it so many times before, and I probably said I'd try not to say it again, but most of the Wii U's games were just not system sellers. The Switch has the likes of Breath of the Wild and Odyssey to actually get units into people's homes, then it has all that other stuff to supplement. Mario Kart and Smash are indeed system sellers to a certain extent, and the Wii U did have those games, but apparently those just weren't enough by themselves. There just weren't enough of those big hitters to make the system worth buying for most people, even with Kart and Smash. And of course, both of those games were multiplayer games, leaving people who preferred single-player experiences out in the cold. And here's another thing about these two lists of games. The Wii U games you see here released throughout the system's entire 4.5-year run. Months and months would go by without anything interesting coming out. But these Switch games, not even 2 years. And in fact, if you take Smash off the list, these games all fit into 16 months. That many games in 16 months. Not even a year and a half. You're darn straight this lineup looks better on Switch. You're darn straight this was all much less impressive on the Wii U. Then speaking of looking better on Switch, we come to my final point. You can't get mad at people for rejecting the Wii U and embracing the Switch because the Switch is just a much, much better system. It's $300, it's sleek and simple, and it lets me play all these games on the go. The Wii U launched with a $300 bundle, but that one was in ugly white and came with no internal storage, so for most people, the Wii U really cost $350. Despite the price, it had the graphical power of last-gen systems that sold for $200, the only benefit to help justify the price being the gamepad, which was just never that exciting. It was clunky, and for many people, myself included, it was difficult splitting attention between it and the TV. Some games supported off-TV play on the gamepad, but you still had to be sitting right there for it to work. I could go on. It was just a less good system, plain and simple. It didn't attract buyers like the Switch does because it wasn't as good a product as the Switch is. And yeah, marketing and all that factor in as well, but that mostly affects the casual crowd. We're talking about the alleged hypocritical Nintendo fans here. And the truth of the matter is, if any of them didn't buy the Wii U, it was because they didn't feel the Wii U was worth buying. If they're buying Switches now, it's because they feel the Switch is worth buying. And there's no arguing that. You can't reasonably claim that any of these people are wrong or being hypocritical, because despite what some may feel, there is no agenda here. Millions of people weren't convening and scheming over how they might rob the Wii U of its success, only to turn around and make the Switch sell way better by comparison just to do it. Nobody had a totally unfair bias against the Wii U just because. This fan base is hypocritical does not exist. It isn't a thing. I could make an entire video on this one idea, and believe me, I've been wanting to for years, but the whole thing where people try to suggest that each fan base should have one single voice and that any opposing opinions within a fan base are contradictory is ridiculous. We see it all the time with any industry. Movies, shows, music, anything. One very popular one a few years ago was, Nintendo fans say they want something new, but then Nintendo does something new and they all hate it. I mean, it's everywhere, all the time, this whole thing. When X happens, they say A, but when Y happens, they say B. It's just kind of like, oh, so what you're telling me is that each fan base contains people with differing opinions, and that each individual case is affected by tons of different factors. You're telling me that everything isn't completely black or white, that when people ask for something new and Nintendo does something new, for example, that new thing can be either bad or good. And of course, the badness or goodness of that thing is subjective. It's almost like you're telling me that every single individual person is going to have an opinion on a thing, and sometimes they're going to make that opinion public, and sometimes that opinion won't be identical to everyone else's. I talked about this a little bit in my recent video on loot boxes. Basically, people feel the way they feel. They say what they want to say, and it's silly to lump them all into groups and try to call them out for stuff. Some individual people can be hypocritical, sure, that's just humanity for you. But entire fan bases are literally incapable of being hypocritical. Suggesting otherwise is like taking a group of 100 people, pointing to all the ones with red hair and being like, this whole group has red hair. Then the next day, pointing to all the blonde people and going, oh, so yesterday you guys had red hair, but now you're all blonde? Which one is it? I don't like it. It really grinds my gears. It really eats my lunch. It really drops my burrito. That's a real expression, right? Yeah, I'm pretty sure it is. Anyway, thanks for listening to my dumb rant about something that, in the grand scheme of things, or even the medium-sized scheme of things, matters literally none. I would go and plant a tree or do some community service or something, but I've got an E3 pre-show to make. C'est there. I meant to say stay tuned, and I honestly don't know why that came out. Stay tuned.